Hello, my name's Nina Complo. I'm here today with Ruth Elliott, a holistic physical therapist here in Asheville, North Carolina. And we are going to talk about pelvic wisdom. So, Ruth, I'd love for you to share with us a little bit about your background and how you got into this work.
So I began start focusing on women's health physical therapy right in school, in the middle of school. I took my first continuing education class, which they do open to students, but it was a new thing that they even let students come and take kind of advanced training in women's health. But I was certain that I wanted to work with pelvises, with women. I had initially thought of going to midwifery school, and so I started with nursing, and then nursing was just absolutely not right for me. And so I kind of was like, how can I stay in that same place, that same pregnant, postpartum, pelvis? And so once I got into PT school, I didn't realize that women's health existed, and then I found it. So I was just like gung ho. And that before I finished physical therapy school, I was already doing the graduate level research in urinary incontinence and the collegiate athletes where I was attending school. So I just have had this like something burning in me for pregnant and postpartum since I was in high school. And I got derailed by a music degree in the meantime, but then I came through nursing and said no. And then I kind of navigated myself into it through physical therapy. So.
Awesome. So you've been in this field pretty much from the get-go, and you've been specializing with pregnant and postpartum women for most of your PT work?
Really, the way they set it up in physical therapy is that you start out as a women's health physical therapist. So you learn to do pelvic exams, internal vaginal, musculofascial assessments, and then functional assessments of the pelvic floor. And then you usually work your way through to the upper level, advanced kind of pain in the pelvis and pain with intercourse and rectal pain or constipation, how to treat all of that. And then you move on to kind of specializing in pregnant and postpartum. So I've done some of that coursework just continuously throughout the years, but I've completed all of the tracks for understanding the female pelvis, male pelvis, and then moved into regular pregnancy specialization and then advanced pregnancy, like more high risk pregnancy specialization. So I've kind of done all of that training.
Awesome. Okay, so then we're just going to get right into it for our pregnant and postpartum audience. What are some of the most important things you feel like women need to know about their pelvic health during pregnancy? And what pelvic self-care do you recommend for pregnant mamas?
During pregnancy. So the most important thing is to remember that you have a pelvis and a pelvic floor, and it's getting ready to do a really big, important job. And you need to feel very much in control of your pelvis and pelvic floor as a pregnant woman. So if your Kegels are kind of like, what's going on? I'm not sure. Or if you feel pain as you start to grow and expand, or if you've never felt your own pelvic floor with your own hands, if you've never desexualized that area to reclaim it as like an actual body part that you're in control of the same way you're in control of your hands or your toes or something, I would say that is the number one thing that pregnant women need to do, because if you feel in control of a certain aspect of your body, then during the birth process, it makes it much easier to manage those, like the pain, or manage the functioning of that area. And so many women are like, that's the place I have sex, and that's where I pee and poop, the end. And not like, oh, this is a body part and I have a lot more control than I've ever imagined before. I do not think that women need to watch the YouTube videos of that lady who lifts barbells with her vaginal muscles. I do not think you need to be a super power lifter or anything like that. I just think that awareness of that area, how to relax it, how to squeeze it, being sure that if you're in pain, you can soften, you can control the muscles versus kind of an automatic spasming, tightening. So just control, connection. Those would be the number one things that I would encourage for any pregnant woman. And pelvic self-massage can be a great way to get you to that place. So that would be the technique or the thing that I would encourage. Sometimes women are scared of this area, like what's going to happen. And I work very hard in my teaching and my websites that I'm teaching, my local classes and my online classes. I work really hard to help displace that fear and just it's your body. You can massage your thigh, you can massage your vagina. Go for it. Take away that taboo or fear that a lot of women feel.
Awesome. And just to be clear, are you referring to outer massage, inner massage, or both?
So in my online classes, I have a website called holisticpelviceducation.com, and I'm very close to the end of posting multiple classes on there. And in those classes, I teach women how to use a paper map to understand the layout of their vaginal muscles from the inside. So, and then there's this practice you can do with your thumb or your finger or a partner where you're actually massaging from inside the vagina, hooking your thumb down and pressing into those pelvic floor muscles from inside towards the floor. So great to massage externally, great to massage kind of in between the sits bones externally, but probably even better to feel the sensations of something pushing down and pressing down on the pelvic floor and know what that's going to feel like for birth. Even better to put your thumb in and hook and stretch and feel those muscles.
Okay, awesome. So that might kind of be the answer to my next question, but I'm still going to ask, what do you like women to know and to remember? Let's just say if there was one thing you could remember going into labor and giving birth, like if there was just one thing that could be ingrained in a mom's being, what would you want that to be?
The number one thing that I would want ingrained into a mom in her body, like something her to viscerally, somatically know in her being, is that you don't have to push the baby out. The uterus is pushing the baby out. And so if you can take your pelvic floor and make it as relaxed and soft and wide and open as possible and feel like you can accomplish that goal, uh, even if there's a sensation of pain or a sensation of, you're moving around, if you have mentally found the way to relax and drop those muscles down, the same way you're like farting or you're passing gas or you're, starting to pee or urinate, that downward motion, I would want that motion to be in the mom's mind so that they're not inadvertently lifting, squeezing, and resisting the uterus as it pushes the head through the pelvic canal. And that softening and that opening and that lack of tension also helps the ligaments soften and open in the pelvis. So that would be the number one pelvic floor, and very specifically the pelvic floor thing that I would want women who are pregnant to be sure that they know and feel comfortable with.
Awesome. Awesome. I feel like I'm not sure if I've heard it phrased exactly like that. Like we think of a lot of kind of work, like giving birth is a lot of work and I'm going to like do this monumental task. And, sometimes you hear people talking about relaxing and breathing into it and all of this, but I don't hear that a lot around the actual giving birth, like you hear it around contractions, like relax, soften, soften. But to talk about it with the baby actually emerging, I think that that's really powerful and that more people need to hear that. So thank you for sharing that.
Definitely through the labor process before transition, that is absolutely critical. The baby can go down, down, down. And imagine those pelvic floor muscles are giving a big green light to the contractions and the descent as the baby moves through the pelvic canal, right? And so then during transition, there's a tendency to push really hard, which means squeeze everything, which includes the muscles, which can also slow down that process at the end. So yeah, figuring out how to push in a downward direction versus just squeeze and put pressure. That makes sense, just to differentiate the two. Yeah. So transition's a little bit different. After transition, the pushing phase is different than the just laboring phase. The mechanics are, but the idea is the same, is that you want to push or think or relax and bulge down instead of tightening.
Yeah.
So just to clarify.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So then after the baby comes out, what are some of the most important things you want women to know about their pelvic health after birth? And what might pelvic self-care look like after the baby comes?
Well, there is that sacred 40-day window, And during that sacred 40-day window, don't worry about too much. If a woman is in miserable pain just laying around, then I would say definitely check in with a pelvic PT. If you can just sort of kind of get through the day and hopefully not leak too much urine or too much stool, depending on tearing or, you know, mechanics of the pelvic floor, there is a lot of healing that naturally happens just because the trauma of birth, the experience of it, and then just the natural healing process. 40 days later, you're kind of like, okay, where am I now? These are the issues. If I have issues, a lot of women are fine. But if I have issues at 40 days or at 6 weeks or so, that's about where, you know, you want to check in and see, you know, how am I doing? With your body. So otherwise, just kind of normal functioning. Don't worry about too much for the first 40 days. Just kind of focus on the baby and relax as much as you can, and don't hold your pee for too long, and all the normal things that they say. Once you've hit the 4 to 6 weeks mark, it's good to say, you know, like, am I able to hold my urine? Am I able to hold back stool? Am I feeling pain if I touch my own pelvis or pelvic floor? Am I feeling an aversion to touching my pelvic floor? If I do touch it, is there sharpness? Is there tension? Can you feel difficulty emptying your bladder? Is it hard to, you know, get stool moving? Are you constipated at this point? So there's a lot of things that, you know, you want to kind of assess. If everything's totally normal, then I would say, you know, get your clearance for intercourse from your midwife if everything's fully healed, and then you can kind of move forward. So that's like best case scenario. 6 weeks though, you want to wait till everything's really had a chance to heal postpartum. Now, if there's any complications other than like, I feel wonderful, it's easy to poop and pee, I'm not constipated, no pain with touching my own self, and then, you know, you initiate intercourse and it's all comfortable, that's like ideal. If anything other than that happens, it's a good time to see a pelvic PT, because I can't necessarily say what is going on for each woman postpartum. If there was a 2nd degree tear, that's different than if there was a 4th degree tear, different than if they were stitched up deep or stitched superficially, or it's different if it's just kind of the muscles are feeling, you know, fatigued from sitting too much and they haven't been activated. So the concerns are going to be so varied in the postpartum population. It's hard to say like, what do they need to know? But I think the most important thing to know is that timing, that 4 to 6 week period. You should notice a lot of symptoms changing. Things that were kind of really bad the first week or two should be getting better. So if things are getting worse, you need to get checked out. If things are feeling painful, dysfunctional, then you need to get checked out. And that's about your window. So don't freak out in the first 2 weeks. Wait till 4 to 6 weeks to make your move.
Yeah. Awesome.
We recommend at my practice also that women go ahead and book a postpartum evaluation during their pregnancy. Like, you know, that postpartum time is so difficult to get yourself in and take care of yourself, and you're struggling to like get to the bathroom and like wash your face or whatever, much less go to an appointment that's specifically created to focus on you and your body and your own healing. And so just as an accountability point, we encourage women to make that appointment with us at 6 weeks just for a check-in, just for us to say, oh, wow, you're healing great. And then, you know, it's encouraging. Let's just kind of like soften your pelvis and sacrum and work with your low back. And let's give you 2 or 3 stretches that you can be doing to kind of maintain where you are. That's the best case scenario. And then, you know, it goes kind of down the line from there about if they need more like specific exercises or hands-on treatment, or if they need more strengthening, or if there was a nerve damage because of the knees being pushed too close to the chest, or if there was a, you know, a trauma in the pelvis, or if there's scar tissue, like all of that would need to be worked out. An assessment, just having it booked for you, could be as great as just a feel-good treatment, or it could be as important as changing, you know, urinary incontinence postpartum, or making sex comfortable, you know, more right away, and making it you reclaim your body a little faster. So that appointment being booked during pregnancy really helps with the accountability of actually showing up for it in the postpartum when your brain's a little foggy and you're focused on other people, you know?
Yeah, and that's awesome. And could you like illuminate just a little bit what the difference is for a woman going into that 6-ish week appointment with a pelvic PT versus what she's going to experience at her 6-week checkup with her midwife or doctor?
If she has a lot of solid complaints and she tells her midwife or doctor, like, here's a lot of, hard stuff going on for me, they might go ahead and recommend a PT appointment. Sometimes midwives and OBs actually check scar tissue if they've had bleeding that's not getting well. But if you go into that visit and and they say, how are you? And you say, fine. And you say, how's your pelvic floor healing? Any bleeding? And you say nothing, and there's very little conversation. Then the OB midwife, they often don't even check pelvic floor again. They don't assess pelvic floor tissue or pelvic floor musculature or function in that follow-up visit. They just be sure that you're not having any big red flags, like still bleeding at 6 weeks or severe pain with urination or pooping. But I've had moms who were cleared for intercourse at 6 weeks, but they had 8 out of 10 pain with eliminating their bowels, and that lasted for years. And the midwife and doctor didn't necessarily follow up with that being a problem. So I've kind of seen it go all over the place as far as what that visit can look like. And the more a woman complains, the more they get assessed and referred out. So if they're, depends on the personality too of the mom or the postpartum woman. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate your recommendation to be proactive about it though, and just while you're pregnant, go ahead and schedule that appointment, or like, I guess as soon as the birth happens, have somebody schedule the appointment for you so you make sure that you go. And it can be really hard to focus on yourself at all in that time, especially in the first 6 weeks.
Absolutely.
So you are a holistic pelvic physical therapist, and I would love for you to talk a little bit about the different aspects that you bring into your work and why it's important for us to connect with the pelvis all the time, not just through the childbearing cycle. What else is going on in that area for people, like energetically?
Okay. Yeah. So the pelvis is also a storehouse for emotions. In Chinese medicine, they've known for, thousands of years that when the brain can't handle a certain emotion or a certain energy in the brain, a trauma, for example, it discharges that energy into the organ systems. And the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, is what does that. And sometimes the energy that is being stored in the organ systems that the brain never could process at that point causes an organ to dysfunction, causes an organ to lack chi, if that makes sense. So when your body has discharged emotions into the pelvis doesn't function, or the pelvis is heavy. The energy in it is stagnant. The energy is imbalanced. The muscles can then be thicker and harder to fire, or can just be kind of turned off. If there was a trauma to the pelvis during labor, delivery, birth, postpartum, any time, or even prior to giving birth, then that trauma is most likely stored and kind of locking up the tissues in the pelvis. And so on some level, I work with the muscles and the fascial system, the ligaments, making sure the bones are in alignment and making sure that women have awareness of their motor function, right? That's like the standard physical therapy. And then when I add in a holistic approach, for me, what that looks like is tuning in with my heart, with my own body, into where the energies aren't flowing, and then letting myself sink into my own intuition and asking if there's anything that I am given right now that will help inspire that mom to help to clear, to release, to maybe open their eyes to where their energy got stuck through an emotional process. So let's say there's one patient, in the past that I've treated who had a lot of shame around not wanting to reinitiate sex with their partner postpartum. And when we worked on just the musculature, the tissues were just hard and rigid and thick. And then the moment we were able to kind of like, oh, it's that emotion of shame that you're holding on to in your tissues. So just imagine walking around feeling shame all the time, and the way that would tension the body. So when we addressed that shame and just allowed her to verbalize it and feel safe and be able to kind of move through and accept that that's a reality for her, the tissues immediately, my finger is right on there, and she says, that's what it is. Oh, her whole body shifts, the tensioning in the pelvis around that muscle that I was touching where the shame was being stored softened and opened, and her pelvis kind of shifted positions more immediately. Where 2 weeks prior to like naming that, it was like, oh, we're fighting against your body. Why is it holding? What's it holding? So that's one example. And then there are multiple women that I've worked with who have had a trauma during the delivery process. And that trauma, basically, imagine that fight, flight, freeze, right? And what often happens is that women freeze. Because that fight in us, in that laboring process, that vulnerability, we don't usually like lash out and set clear boundaries and push people away. We're kind of like, I'm just trying to do this really intense thing. So I've experienced that moment when there's a trauma, or a doctor says something hard to hear, or you get kind of not great news, or your body whatever, the body freezes. And in that freeze process, unless a woman becomes aware of herself and really has the resources and the support to reactivate her own control, the body can get stuck in that freeze, that moment of freeze. So then I work with women emotionally and energetically to help unfreeze from the moment that they began to freeze. So we kind of process what happened emotionally prior to the freeze. Boom, there's the freeze. Let's really go back and reclaim your power from that moment. So helping the body integrate all the things that happened during the birth is another way that I work with women postpartum on a more energetic and emotional level to help them kind of reconnect. And then let's say, when you're saying, what about the pelvis all the time? This can happen that a woman becomes aware of it 30 years later. You know, your child is 30, you're 30 years postpartum, you've had a pelvis this whole time, maybe you forgot about it. I recently had a patient come in and say, she said they wanted to do a hysterectomy for her. And she said, no, I want my uterus. Don't like give me anything else. Like, what else can we do? And so what she and I were able to figure out when I got to her scar from having an episiotomy, one of the reasons she had tensioned her entire pelvis for the last 30 years is because the episiotomy registered in her mind and in her body and in her heart as a sexual trauma, something done to her pelvis that she did not welcome. So while it's not something that we all usually think of as being a trauma, sexual trauma, it registered for her as that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So say that the energy is flowing really well in your pelvis and that like you're connected with that area. Could you speak a little bit to the magic of that area? Like when things are going good, you're not, you're healed, you don't have like blockages there. What can that look like?
What's coming to me is that when you feel your pelvis in full alignment and in full activated glory, the woman is unashamed. The woman is calm. The woman feels easy to ground through her body. She has a healthy, creative cycle of having an idea, of inviting that idea, of nourishing that idea, and then of creating her creation, and then taking a deep breath of rest and restoration, and then starting that cycle over. A new idea comes, engage with it, work it, gestate it, release it, and then restore. And that cycle is very active and healthy in the woman's life. And she sees that in her business and in her relationships and in her friendships. So that's one thing. And then another piece of it that has more energy with the pelvic floor is that the woman feels supported by her life and by her family and her friends and her circle of inner people. And that deep support softens her entire body in every moment of every day, and feeling that connection to source and from her own body, and seeing them as being very similar. My body is supporting me, and the world around me is supporting me. My career is supporting me. My family is supporting me. Oh my goodness, I'm so supported. And when I find a woman who's like that, I get very excited.
Yay.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful. Is there any more juicy pelvic wisdom you'd like to share with us today? I mean, that's an awesome note to leave it on if you want to leave it there, or if there's anything else. That'd be great.
Let's see. On my website, I have created one particular class that I feel is just an absolute nourishing opportunity for women. It's called Your Enlightened Pelvis. And there are about 6.5 hours of teaching audio, guided visualizations, meditations, handouts, outlines of what I'm saying so you can kind of follow along, take notes. And I really go through some of the work of Tammy Lynn Kent, who wrote the book called Wild Feminine. And I go through some work on healing and restoring lineage support. So feeling supported by your maternal and paternal lines. So even more support to soften and calm your nervous system and your pelvis and pelvic floor. And I also teach about, harmony and resonance within your pelvic bowl and the women around you and the energy around you, like the greater energies of the world and humanity. So I feel that particular class is incredibly beneficial for any woman who is interested in deepening an understanding of her own body and her pelvis and how our bodies use the energy of our organs and our muscles to fuel our daily life. Like, why does support register in the pelvic floor? Why does creativity matter for uterine function? Any questions like that? How do you bridge that mind, body, spirit concept in your own self and your own being? That class answers all those questions super thoroughly. So that's a downloadable kind of audio and visual class that I have. And then if someone's looking for more like just information on how do you maintain pelvic wellness, generally speaking, there's another video that I'm posting soon called Save Your Vagina. I teach that locally in Asheville, and I've turned it into a video class online as well. And so if women want more basic information, I, of course, smatter and sprinkle the wisdom into that class just here and there, just enough. But I really give a lot of tangible, practical, physical and neurological things that women can do to help support themselves pregnant, postpartum, or in the years following. So really basic information that every woman needs is in the class Save Your Vagina online. And what I would say is that we all tend to dump things in our bodies and our pelvises and live in our minds. And some of us are lucky enough that we've learned to live in our hearts. But I think even fewer of us have learned to really live deeply into our bodies and harness all of the energy and the power that we store in our organ systems and our tissues that can fuel our lives. And so that would be my encouragement to anyone watching this interview, reading this blog, is that you have an enormous amount of untapped energy that is stored in your pelvis and in your body. And it is invaluable to dig deep, get to know it, understand it, harness it, and then be able to access it when times are hard or when you need more loving, emotional, and spiritual connection with your own body because your life is hard, if that makes sense. I'll just turn to my body. My body can deeply support me. So somehow those classes offer more than I can offer on this video interview, but I think they're where the magic is, and spending time with your own self and your own body, that's also where the magic is. So
yay, thank you so much, Ruth. It was such a pleasure speaking with you today, and we'll leave in the notes where to find you and your beautiful classes. And thank you so much.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.